I wanted to spend a few minutes today talking about something that is in the news this week, and that's depression. Depression is something that we don't talk about very much, but I think we've all heard of, or we've seen, or maybe we've experienced. We don't talk about it because it's kind of depressing. Depression is kind of depressing to just think about it because it can look overwhelming. It's not clear that we can really cure it as a whole because it impacts so many people. There are so many reasons why it happens. But basically, this week, the World Health Organization, the WHO, issued a statement that the amount of people reporting themselves as depressed has gone up 20% in the last decade. And to some extent, it asks the question that the world is getting wealthier as a whole, and that we have more tools, more technology, we're more connected, we're theoretically closer to our friends than we've ever been. We have more entertainment. We can find humor, we can find shows that make us laugh, we can find activities that we can go to restaurants, we can go places. We can do tourism, we can travel the world. And all these things become more and more available and more accessible to all of us, to more of us. And in spite of that, people are not happy. So it looks like the next iPhone is not going to solve the problem. And it begs the next question, which is, what are the causes? And I haven't seen the detailed statistics. So there's only so much that I personally know about depression. I've read about depression. I haven't done a real in-depth study. But I think the statistics would show us that it happens in more than one country. It happens for more than one reason. And then it'll get somewhat complicated to think about the problem and the solution. So let's simplify the discussion. I think if we look at ourselves, there are days I feel low. There are days where I'm feeling good. That's most of the days. But I think some days all of us feel low. And how low do we need to feel to be technically depressed? I think there's a range. There's a range, but there's also a fine line where it's not really clear whether someone is clinically diagnosed because they've gone to the doctor, because they told themselves that they are depressed, or because they're taking medicine. What qualifies someone truly as, being in a state of depression versus having, one low day, or having several low days and having just a season of life. That is difficult. And so I think if we looked at it that way, the rate of depression could be seen as 100%, because everybody has a low day someday. And so to some extent it means that we're not alone. If we have a low day, our friends have a low day. Everybody has a low day sometime. And it doesn't solve the problem, but it means that it's just part of life. It's just part of being alive and being human, that we have emotions and that sometimes things don't work and it affects us. So from there, we can think about friends and people around us, because I think it's a natural source of information. What we've experienced, of course, is our own experience, but what we've experienced are the people around us that we've seen. And how, whether they talked to us about it, how they were feeling, and why they were maybe feeling that way. I can think of a few friends that have told me, yeah, I'm going through a depression, or I'm feeling depressed right now, and they were going through tough times. It can happen out of the blue. It can be purely physiological, that basically the brain starts making these depressive hormones, whatever they're called, without a reason, without an underlying reason. But in my experience, when I had conversations with friends, it's because they were going through a tough time. Maybe they lost their job. Maybe their relationship with their loved one was coming to an end, and there was some change in the air, and change is difficult when you've committed all of yourself into a relationship, all of yourself into a job, and these things don't work, and more likely than just being random, there was something in that person's life that turned it into a season, and that season was just a tough time. So I think we have to think about how we solve the underlying cause, which is, how do people move on with their career, their jobs, how they find a place in society that makes them feel respected, that makes them feel useful in their professional life, and that makes them feel fulfilled, that they can express themselves through that job, because the job is not just a job, it's a way to fulfill yourself and to express yourself, and then of course it makes a living. That's important. We all need to make a living, but I think there are many aspects of a job that makes it sort of an antidepressant, that makes it part of the meaning of our life. And then, of course, there's the relationship aspect, and I think time makes a big difference in relationships. I've been in love a few times, and when these relationships ended, we can get very focused on someone else, and whether it's rational or irrational, it's a sort of a weird mood that sort of takes its own dynamic. We replay the past unnecessarily, and eventually with time does wonderful things, which is it erases some of the the obsessions, not the memories, but the obsessions. I think once this thing goes away, you look at it differently, and then you go back to a more fun state, what I would call yourself. You get back to yourself. So just to finish on this idea of depression, there's the underlying reality, but there's also the metaphysics. Metaphysics being how our day goes physically. Do we practice any sports? And you can see that in many of those posts that I publish, I try, don't always do it, I try to put a lot of sports and exercise and being outside and being close to nature, because doing this doesn't change reality, but it puts us into a good mood. It makes our body stronger. It clears all the toxins. It gives us a moment with Mother Nature, which is essential, absolutely essential to a meaning of life and our living, versus constantly being in an office. Not never being in an office, but constantly being in an office, or in a car, or in a a constrained area. We're just not made for this, and too much of that is very depressive. Same goes for nutrition. We live in the era of more junk food, more eating things that don't make us feel very great. Think about sodas or any kind of candy or things that looks like a candy. We're exposed. We're exposed to that in our daily life, and we don't always have time to cook at home. Cooking at home is a huge privilege, but it's also not very expensive relative to eating outside. And if you can carve the time to doing this, you'll see that you'll get to eat pretty good food, and you'll know the ingredients, because the ingredients, you'll have bought them, so you know exactly what you're buying. You know if it's GMO or not. You know if it's if it's the kind of ingredients you want to have in your food. So the nutrition is also very important. And then sleep. Sleep is so essential that we forget about it sometimes. We live busy lives, and sometimes at night we've had too much caffeine. We can't get ourselves to sleep. So we're sitting in our chair, in our sofa, we're doing something else very, very late that is not necessary. And we carve this very essential time of sleeping for something else. And the lack of sleep is not good for the mood. So I highly recommend, if you want a good energy and good mood, to try and limit the sort of distracting activities at night, because you'll get more sleep, and more sleep is better. So it's a dual approach. We're not going to solve the problem today about depression, but I think talking about it is the first step, and having a good friend that we can open up to and discuss it. Like I say, to an extent, the rate of depression is 100%. Everybody has a low day sometime. So your friend will understand, and it's good to talk about it. And fixing, of course, the underlying problem is it's ideal, but until that happens, everything else around it, good sleep, good whole foods, and a lot of exercise makes a huge difference. So we're March 31st. Tomorrow is April Fool's. You're going to start seeing very soon things in your inbox and around you that are not to be taken literally, but nothing needs to be taken literally either. So April 1st it's not like any other day of the year. The news sometimes give you things that you have to take with a grain of salt, and particularly tomorrow.